I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Friday. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a special guest with me tonight, Miss Misty Winston. She's the host of TNT Radio, also Facts on the Ground. She also has a show on YouTube called Bitch. And of course, she is an Assange activist. Misty, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be back. It's been a little while since we've done something together, so I'm pumped.
All right. I know it's been a minute. I know that you have been really busy working on an event in DC that's coming up. I do have the graphic here. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that?
Okay, so it started in London, I think. Somebody just picked a day and was like, we're going to do an action on Saturday, October 8th. And so it kind of snowballed from there. The action in London is going to be massive. They're trying to surround Parliament. There's a really great video that Stella Morris did, which is Julian Assange's wife, where she kind of explained, because one side of Parliament is, of course, water, but they're going to go all the way across the river. They're going to try to go all the way around Parliament. So from that action, it kind of, as is often the case with Assange stuff, somebody will say, hey, we're going to do something on this day. And then somebody else will be like, oh, well, hey, we can do something too. And then somebody else says, oh, well, we'll do something too. And it snowballed. So now there's global actions happening all across the globe. There's something in, I think, Toronto and Ottawa. DC, obviously, is the one I'm doing. There's stuff in Germany and all over the place. So the one in DC is going to be from noon to 3 outside the Department of Justice, which is obviously ground zero for the Assange case. And we have just a ton of amazing speakers. We're still working on some stuff, but we have, I can tell you guys, we have people like, so Jim Bovard, who's a libertarian author. We have Eliza Blue, who is a human trafficking survivor and advocate. I'm really excited to have her there. Chris Hedges is going to be there. John Kiriakou, Reverend Annie Chambers, who I adore. I've interviewed her but not met her in person, so I'm very excited for that. Garland Nixon, Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's is also going to be there. Yeah, Joe Loria from Consortium News, who I'm a huge fan of, is going to be there. Dan Cohen, who's also an amazing independent journalist. Stephen Donziger was just announced today. Randy Credico managed to secure him, so Stephen Donziger is going to be there as well. And I just got confirmation a few hours ago that Dave DeCamp, who's a journalist from antiwar.com, is also going to be there and speaking. We have a bunch of, and Sabby is hopefully maybe going to be able to come as well. So hopefully she'll be able to speak too. But we have a lot of really amazing guests, and we're working on some more. So it's going to be a really awesome event. I'm super pumped.
Oh, man. Here's the graphic here, guys. Hands off Assange, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. October 8th, U.S. Department of Justice. That's 950 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C. Should be an awesome event. I should know for sure by next week if I'll be able to be there. I gotta say, with the speaker lineup, are you sure you want me to speak?
Yes. Are you kidding? Of course. As soon as you were like, my husband and I might be able to come, I was like, oh my gosh, you have to speak. And as soon as we had a meeting last night, I was like, hey, Sabby might be coming. What do you guys think about having her speak? Instantly, everybody's like, yes, absolutely. Everybody I'm organizing with loves RBN and loves the work that you do. So yes, absolutely. No question about it. And we're also going to have, I'm a stickler for having, like the on the street activists also speaking. So it's not just going to be, obviously when you're having an event like this, you want big names because you want to garner attention and support for your action. So that's, kind of the nature of the beast. And those people are all amazing. But there will also be local DC activists who will be speaking. There will be local activists from Boston. I mean, they'll probably rope me into speaking, even though I hate public speaking. They always kind of force me onto a megaphone somewhere. So yeah, it's not just going to be a bunch of big name blue checks. There's also going to be the people. I'm a stickler for that. I want the people who are putting the work in every day, all day, to also have a platform to speak at these events too.
Awesome. And Kano was just asking, did I hear Annie Chambers?
Yes.
The combo couch was great. All right. That is awesome.
Yeah,
this is great, Misty. Great lineup. Ashura asked, is Jimmy going to be there?
So Jimmy he's actually going to be in DC the following week. So I asked him, he wanted to be there, but he's unable to stretch out his visit to DC that long or to make it twice in that short of amount of a time. But we are also going to try to do a video, like a social media video campaign, and then also have audio clips of different people who can't be there. People like Jimmy or somebody like Glenn Greenwald, who's obviously in Brazil. His husband's very ill. It's not feasible for him to make it. But we would like for those people to be able to also participate and express their support. So we're going to do a social media video campaign with those people, and then also play a longer audio clip at the action. So we're hoping to get something from Stella, who is Julian's wife, his father and brother, John and Gabriel, those kinds of people. So I wish Jimmy could come in person. That would be really cool. Unfortunately, he's just not able to make that happen.
Yeah, he's got a busy schedule because he's still on tour too. I have to ask Misty, and I think it's important for you to let everyone else know about this as well. Misty is probably, for those who are not aware, Misty is probably the, best Assange activist that I know of. You talk about it all the time. You're not just, talking about it, like you've gone to multiple Assange events. And I do have to ask, what was it about this particular situation that made you so interested and say, listen, we got to fight for this guy?
Well, I was always a supporter of WikiLeaks and the work that they do. I'm a free speech, press freedom activist, always have been. I've always been very kind of hard line on the issue of free speech. And I've also always been kind of hard line on, being able to hold power to account. And WikiLeaks, I mean, there's nobody that does it better, right? They've exposed more stories. They've exposed more corruption than anybody else on earth, probably combined. And they've done it all without ever having to retract a single word that they've ever published. They have a 100% record of accuracy. So to me, that's always been super cool, very important. I've always respected and admired the work that they have done. But really what pushed me kind of over the edge into maybe obsession. First of all, I mean, I have severe ADHD, so I do get kind of hyper-focused on things. But the Assange thing, I think it was the moment that really kind of flipped me into hyperdrive was when he was pulled out of the Ecuadorian embassy. I think up until then, I had been a little bit naive, and I'm like, they're not going to arrest a journalist for doing journalism. Right. Come on. They did. That's right. So that was kind of the moment where I was like, oh, okay, this is serious. We really got to get into this. So.
Yes, no, I totally hear you. Have you had a chance to speak to his wife and his brothers?
Yes. So, I mean, I've been in contact with Stella a couple different times. I've organized with John and Gabriel on the Home Run for Julian tour. I did the Columbus stop, and then Paula and I also did a final stop in Washington, D.C. Last summer. They were at those events. And I've done a couple panels with Gabriel as well. And they are just the nicest people. If you ever do anything with John Shipton, if you are in independent media, I would recommend making sure his volume is turned up. He's very soft-spoken, but he has a wicked sense of humor, and he is on a mission, really, and has been for some time now, literally traveling the world. I think they're in Mexico right now. I don't know if they've left yet, but they were presented with the keys to the city and all of that stuff. So they're just traveling all over the globe trying to raise awareness and support for Assange, and they're great people.
Yeah, for people who are not aware, last year his father and his brother actually did a U.S. tour. They came to the U.S. I believe Jimmy had them on. I'm trying to remember who else. Like
Katie Halper, yeah. I think Crystal Ball. I don't remember if it was. I think it might have been with Sagar. They did an interview with him, I think. So yeah, they did a couple. Katie's usually really good about covering Assange and all of that stuff. So yeah, they did some rounds on the independent media circle or circuit, trying to get support. I think they went on Tucker.
That's right.
Yeah, they try to as many media appearances as they can do. I mean, that's really helpful, especially when we're dealing with a massive media blackout.
Misty, have you realized like a lot of people still don't know about this?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. Again, like I just said, there's a major media blackout and has been really since the beginning. This has been going on for over a decade, about 12 years now. It's very rarely talked about. When it is, it's talked about in a very disingenuous way, a very slanted. The coverage is always very stupid and biased, and it's a bunch of smears and propaganda. Even Crystal and Sagar did a whole segment where they mocked Julian Assange and laughed at him and pushed some of the bullshit propaganda. So yeah, it's a real struggle to get information out there. It's really hard. Anything on YouTube is this. I mean, don't mention Assange in the title because it'll be shadow banned. That's it. You have to be very careful about that stuff. And so, yeah, I would say the average American citizen has no idea who Julian Assange is or what's happening to him or how it impacts their life. And that's really what we're up against.
That's right. Most people I've spoken to have no idea. Like I was talking to my parents about it last year and my dad was like, who?
Yeah.
And I explained the whole story and he was like, what? Like, why is this not on mainstream media? Why don't people know about this? And I'm like, it's not really something that they want to talk about. And I know Joe Biden has been asked questions about this. One time, actually, last year, he was asked a question about it during a press conference and he just walked away from the podium. That was one of the questions I had for Ro Khanna when I interviewed him. I didn't get a chance to get to that question. But yeah, it's kind of the topic that a lot of politicians just run away from. They don't really want to talk about it.
Including Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, to my knowledge, has only been asked one time publicly and he literally like can't talk about it and took off running. Yeah, the politicians are very rarely asked about this. And when they are, they like to give very vaguely worded answers. Like AOC was asked by Jeremy Scahill and she has concerns about Assange, whatever that means. He obviously didn't push back on her. So yeah, politicians are very rarely asked about this. And usually when they are, they don't have great answers. So it's, I've always said, I don't think that we're going to be able to depend on them. It really is going to take mass public pressure. I mean, we have to it's up to us, really.
Where does his case stand now, Misty, in reference to whether or not he can be released? I do know that Merrick Garland actually can step in here too, but he's kind of like he's like non-existent. Like I never see this man. Like seriously.
Yeah, he's useless and really controlled. I mean, it's not really up to him. He's, the figurehead. It's not really up to him though. But technically, yes, Merrick Garland can stop in today and drop the charges. That's why Julian Assange is being held in prison. He's being held in a supermax prison in London. It's called they liken it to the Guantanamo Bay of the UK, on remand. So that means without charge. He's being held. So he initially had 50 weeks he was serving for bail jumping, which was bogus anyway. But that has long since run out, and he is being held in a supermax prison alongside some of the worst terrorists and murderers and all of that stuff in the UK, simply because the United States says so. So his case, as of right now, they maybe a couple weeks ago submitted what's called perfected grounds for appeal. So they a little while ago submitted for an appeal and that was denied. So this is just kind of a last ditch effort. So if this is not accepted, if they choose to turn down this request for an appeal, he could really be extradited at literally any minute.
That's right. Does Roger Waters know about the event coming up?
He does. So he is, unfortunately, again, we didn't choose the date on this. So we're dealing with a lot of stuff that it's unfortunate that we have to deal with. I think he's going to be in Dallas that day. Is the show in Dallas that day? But he is aware. I think he's going to help spread the word. We're going to try to, as I mentioned, we're going to try to get people to do videos who are unable to participate in person. So we're going to try to get him to do one of those for us. And obviously, I mean, he's a fantastic supporter. He's done, he's allowing us to go to all of his, the shows that he's doing in the United States and set up tables. So I think he'll do whatever he can to help us along the way.
Yeah, it's so important to have those voices. people who
Yes.
have like that large audience to get the word out as well. I'm curious in reference to this particular situation as well. How long does he have until a decision is made?
So we don't really have a hard line answer. There's really no set deadline or anything. It was kind of people were guessing that it could happen anytime this month. I would say is probably safe. So it may even be something that we have an answer for before the event. It's as with everything in this case, it's hurry up and wait. They like to drag everything out for as long as humanly possible. And there's really, we're always left in a state of limbo. There's never any like on this date, we will have an answer on at this time where there will be a response or whatever. It's always just kind of like up in the air. And we're all just kind of flying by the seat of our pants at all times. We live in a perpetual state of scramble.
So the UK, what do you think that they will do?
They'll do whatever they're told. I mean, they have already. They will do whatever they're told. It's really unfortunate. It's something that Julian himself called out when he was being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy, that the UK needs to stand up to the US empire. They don't make their own decisions. The United States makes their decisions for them. I think that's kind of been laid bare over just the Julian Assange thing itself, the entire thing. The idea that they're holding a journalist who has no history of violence whatsoever in a supermax prison, just because they say so, I think is pretty telling to where they stand. And every step along the way they have done as they've been told. I don't see that there's any reason why that will change.
That's so unfortunate. And the thing is, it's not just Julian Assange. There's also Daniel Hale.
Yes. And Daniel Hale should not be in prison. He is in prison in Marion, Illinois, in a communications management unit. For those people who are not familiar with what a communications management unit is, it is special administrative measures under a different name, and that is just essentially torture. So you are basically thrown into a cell and forgotten about. The staff, the prison guards, are trained to not interact with you. You get very little human interaction throughout your day. You get very little visits. They're very controlled, monitored like crazy. You don't get, most of your mail. You don't have access to the outside time. You might get an hour a day, maybe, if they're feeling generous. So it really is torture. And after the war on terror started, they kind of dressed it up and gave it a new name. So now it's a communications management unit. But it's really just, if you look up special administrative measures, it's essentially the same thing.
Terrible. Has he had the opportunity to see his wife or his kids?
Yeah, he gets, fairly regular visits. I think every Sunday they're generally able to see him. But it is very short visits. Obviously, it's under ridiculous circumstances where the two little boys, Gabriel and Max, have to be searched to the nth degree, including they have to check inside their mouths and underneath their feet and their shoes and all of this stuff. And that's an experience that these little boys have to go through on a regular basis just to see their father. During COVID, it was really restrictive. There was a time period where the kids weren't allowed in at all. And then there was a time period where they could have visitation, but they weren't allowed to even touch each other. So I'm a parent. I can't imagine being away from my kids and then you bring them to me and I can't touch them. Like, that's horrifying. So yeah, the visitation situation is not great. And it is very restrictive.
They're treating him worse than someone like the Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Yes, they are. Yes, indeed they are. It's again, it's mind-blowing to me that this guy can be treated this way out loud like this, and people don't really seem to care. It really does show how effective the smear campaign against Julian Assange has been. They've managed to turn him into kind of a comic book villain that people don't like, even though they don't really know why. And so they've been able to manufacture consent for the treatment that he's receiving right now. Because people are apathetic to it. They don't see how it impacts them, and they don't care about him.
And this is another thing I think that needs to go back to where Chris has just talks about this a lot, right? Prison reform, things that need to change within the prison system. Solitary confinement should not be allowed, in my opinion. I also consider that to be a form of torture as well.
Yes, and you're not alone. I mean, I think Amnesty International considers it a form of torture. It is a form of torture, and Julian Assange has been subjected not just to the torture he's receiving now on Belmarsh, but he's been subjected to over a decade of psychological torture. That's not me making that up. That's former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer. He has examined him along with two other physicians, and they have determined that he has been a victim of psychological torture for over a decade. And that's just been a lot. That includes the time that he spent in the embassy. I mean, when you start hearing about the way that he's been treated and the things that they've done to him, it starts to sound like a crazy, like bad spy movie, but it's real life. It's what's really happening to him. And it's really, really, really depressing that they've been able to get away with it for so long.
Yes, I don't know if people really can grasp this, but yeah, this has been going on for a long time. You may hear more about it now, at least on independent media, but it's been going on for a long time. And it doesn't help if you have someone like TYT, they were guilty of this too.
Yes.
They also made fun of the situation. So people, I think a lot of people don't fully understand the scope of it, right? Because of the message that they've received from some on independent media. I do have to ask, Marjorie Taylor Greene came out in support of this as well. At first, I thought, she's just saying this because it's happening under a Democrat president, but then it was brought to my attention that she was saying this under Donald Trump as well. So she's heavily in favor of freeing someone like Julian Assange. Do you think that she would come to an event like this?
Maybe. I have reached out. It's difficult to get any elected official to really take a hardline stance on this and to show up. We've also reached out to people in Thomas Massey's camp. He has been vaguely supportive in the past as well. We've reached out to somebody like Justin Amash, who's no longer in office, Tulsi Gabbard as well. They're no longer in office, but have been previously vocally supportive of Julian Assange in the past. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, look, I don't like her. I disagree with her on a whole lot. But if you know me, you know that I don't care. I don't, if you, I'm somebody who, this is a very important issue. It's not about me, my ego. It's not about my personal beef with any one individual. We're looking to bring people together. This is something that impacts everybody. It doesn't matter what ism you subscribe to, what party you belong to, who you voted for. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, we are reaching out to people that I don't like, that don't like me. And that's okay, because it's not about me. It's not about my personal beef with somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's something, this should be an issue where we can all come together and recognize that this is dangerous for all of us.
You know who would be good to get on board with this, and not just necessarily this event, but to really get the message out there? That would be Joe Rogan.
Oh, I wish. I've been trying. If you know anybody that knows somebody that knows Joe, let me know, because he would be huge. I would also like to get Russell Brand. Russell Brand is for sure a supporter. Joe Rogan has spoken about the issue and seems vaguely supportive, but it's been very kind of like, he talked to somebody about it briefly during like a 3-hour long interview, and it was just like something they touched on. So he's not been like super hardline supportive, but I think he almost certainly is, or would be if he knew the situation in its entirety. But yeah, somebody like Joe Rogan or Russell Brand, they have huge platforms. And I would love to get them on board, even if they can't make it in person, to do one of the video clips, or even just to help us promote it, would be massive.
Absolutely. Guys, if you're watching, if you know someone who knows Joe Rogan or Russell Brand, definitely let's get Misty on there. Let's get
I don't
Misty
need to go on, because here comes the people that are like, see, it's all about her. It's not about me. I don't give a shit. I turn down appearances all the time, or I'll offer, hey, I can get you somebody cooler than me. It's not about me. I don't care. Joe Rogan could have Roger Waters on and to talk about it. You know what I mean? Roger, that would be an amazing conversation anyway. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not looking to advance myself. I would just like Joe Rogan to promote the event and get on board with the Free Assange movement, because he could really make a massive difference.
Kill Your Igorgi said Jimmy Dore knows both. Jimmy knows everybody, huh?
He does. Yeah. It's really hard for me to lean on. I don't like exploiting relationships or friendships that I've developed for favors. I'm trying to do better about that for this. I've been trying to call in all the favors because I really want this event to be successful. So if that means I have to kind of just suck it up and do it, I will. So yeah, I mean, I could probably ask Jimmy if he could reach out to Joe and see if we could make something happen. But yeah, then I also Assange Defense is helping as well. They were the ones that facilitated the Roger Waters tour, us being able to table during the tour. So they're going to try to make some inroads with that as well. But if we could get like Roger Waters on with Joe Rogan, that would be incredible.
Yeah, there's different like Assange groups throughout the US, you guys, and there's one here in Boston too. They actually had a protest right outside of Harvard's commencement because Merrick Garland was speaking at Harvard's commencement. And so the protest was directed towards Merrick Garland, like, you can step in here and you can help, right? But like I said, you rarely see this guy.
Yeah. And the Boston crew, shout out to them. They are incredible. They do actions usually every other week, every other Monday. They do something throughout the city, whether it's at something like Harvard's commencement speech, or they'll go to like Faneuil Hall or whatever and just do protests. But they're out there all the time. They are amazing people. They work so hard. And they're actually, Paula is my dear friend, and she's from the Boston crew. She's been very helpful in helping to organize the October 8th thing. I've worked with her for years now. We've been organizing together. But the Boston crew is just, they're great. They're incredible. If you're in the Boston area, you should definitely go and hang out with them at one of their actions. They're awesome.
Absolutely. I do want to talk about TNT radio for a bit. I know like you're on TNT radio. I've been a guest on your show. I just want to say, I think you're doing a great job. Radio is different.
It is. I'm on a hiatus right now. My life got really weird. I've just had I've been sucker punched by the universe numerous times. So I've been on a bit of a hiatus, taking a little bit of a break, which is nice. I needed it. But TNT is fantastic. You know, they have a really wide variety of hosts who talk about various different subjects from all different angles. There's no censorship. Which is amazing. Yeah, they're really great. And they're super supportive of Julian Assange, which I love and appreciate. It's part of the reason why I even got the job, is that they liked and respected the work that I was doing there. And so they wanted to bring me on as kind of like an activist host. And so, yeah, they were the ones that they sent me to Freedom Fest. So they paid for that whole thing so that I could go out there. Obviously, I did promote TNT as well. I did interviews live from Freedom Fest for TNT, but it was really gave us an opportunity to go out there and you know, spread some love for Julian Assange as well. Hey, there's Joseph Arthur. He's great.
Yeah, you guys definitely check out TNT Radio. Like I said, I was on there with Misty, and it's true. Like, you can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah. Like, it's so funny. I forget who it was. Oh, it was Andrew, who I organized with at Action for Assange. He went to say the Rona word. I don't want to get you in trouble, so I won't say it. But he went to, like, he was trying to, you know how you do the thing that I'm doing right now, where you're like trying to say it without saying it. And I'm like, Andrew, you can just say it. You can just say it out loud. You can just say it, scream it, top of your lungs. It's fine. You won't get in trouble. So yeah. It's good. It's nice to just be able to have open conversations and not have to worry about, you know, getting censored or demonetized or deplatformed or any of those things. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
That's right. A lot of you probably don't know this, especially if you're new. Misty was probably one of the first people to invite me on Facts on the Ground. Remember that? That was like way back when I first started.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've always been super supportive. I mean, I'll pat myself on the back for that. I knew that you were going to be amazing. You were amazing, even just starting out. So yeah, I mean, and it's so cool to watch you grow and, like, you know, being able to, what are you, like 16K now or 17K or something? And that's, what am I? I don't know. You just keep know this better than me. You just keep rising. So it's hard for me to keep up. No, you're at 21. Look at me. I'm way behind.
Oh, wow.
Go Sabby, go. See, that's what I mean, but that's, it's so cool for me to be able to watch you grow and RBN grow. And you guys, I mean, you know, I've been, Nick calls me a, what does he say? Honorary member. Yeah. I keep telling him I'm not an honorary member. I'll be the mascot. Yeah, JB, same way. I knew JB was amazing too. I have an eye for these things, you guys. I do. I really do. And yeah, Reef too. Yeah. No, yep. That's always, I don't consider myself, I don't know, I'm an activist, you know what I mean? And so I don't really consider myself a journalist or even like indie media or anything. I guess I am in that space, but I'm really just an activist. And I just want to elevate other people is really more important to me. So that's the only reason I got into this like media thing, to elevate my activism and to elevate other people. And so, yeah, that's fun.
Awesome. And again, guys, I just want to shout this out one more time. Hands Off Assange. That's 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. October 8th. It'll be at the U.S. Department of Justice, 950 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C. And hopefully I will be able to be there as well.
Yes.
Definitely would want to be at this event. But Misty, first and foremost, like, thank you so much for all that you're doing in reference to like Assange. I know you've been doing a lot of work. And sometimes I know that it can be a thankless job, because
I don't need thanks though. I mean, really, I really don't. Like, it's I don't do it for that. I don't do it for like props or for clout or any of that stuff. I'm loud and obnoxious about it because I think it's unbelievably important. And so, yeah, I mean, I somehow ended up with a relatively decent Twitter following. I'm just trying to use that to get as much attention on the Assange stuff as I can. And thank you. You've been also unbelievably supportive of all of the Assange stuff. You always have me on anytime we're having an action to help hype it. And I appreciate that. Just so you know, genuinely, everybody that has me on, I genuinely appreciate the help with that stuff. We can't make it happen if nobody knows we're going to be out there. So everybody that has us on, it's such a help. So thank you for having me on tonight, for having me on every other time that you've had me on. I really hope you can come. I think you would be an amazing addition as a speaker. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And everybody in the chat, you guys are great. You always, help us share the stuff on social media and come to the events when you're able to. And yeah, we can't do it without you.
Awesome. Anything you want to shout out before you leave?
I don't think so. Just if you can come out to the action again, Saturday, October 8th, please come out. If you can't make it, I get it. It's hard to travel and all of that stuff. It's expensive, all that good stuff. We do have a GoFundMe up. You can find that on my Twitter page. It's at Sarcasm Stardust, so that we can get things like flyers to hand out and the sound system and all of that stuff that we're going to need to make it a successful event. So I get it. If you can't donate, that's fine. But just sharing it is super helpful as well. And just getting the flyer out there to as many people, as many eyes as you can. So share it on all your social media platforms. If you know people who you think would be interested in coming out, share it all over the place, in your email, to your friends. If you live in the area and you can go out and help us flyer, that would be great too. We need all the help that we can get.
That's right. Especially if you're in the DC area.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes,
definitely.
please. Yes, please.
Well, Misty, thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing that you are able to make it. I'm going to just go ahead and be positive and think that you're going to be able to make it. So yeah, it'll be great. And we're going to be streaming it too. So if you aren't able to make it in person, we are going to be streaming it, so you won't have to miss out on all the amazing speakers. And hopefully Sabby will be one of them. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All righty.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. Again, guys, if you can make that, please show up there. That should be an awesome event. Like I said, Misty she's amazing about this. She's been doing this for such a long time. Okay. We have a lot to get into. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everybody who is a Sabby patron. All right. Shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you are interested, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. All right. Thank you guys so much for your support. Again, really goes a long way. Definitely appreciate it. Okay. We have some interesting stories to talk about tonight. Hold on, let me get rid of the troll. People have nothing better to do with their time. What are we going to talk about tonight? Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. Tonight, we're discussing Professor Richard Wolff, poverty. Very interesting discussion there. As you guys know, we've been covering Professor Wolff's economic update once a week on this show. He's been breaking down different things each time, and this time he is discussing homelessness, wages, poverty. So that's going to be an interesting discussion. I'm also going to cover Ron DeSantis versus Governor Charlie Baker, which is my governor. So we got to talk about what just happened early this morning at Martha's Vineyard. We're also going to discuss minor league win. What has happened in minor league baseball and why should you hear about it? And of course, Misty Winston was just here to talk about the action for Julian Assange. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our first story. The minor league baseball. I've been to a minor league baseball game once. It was still fun, just as fun as like going to a Red Sox game, to be honest with you. But there are some things about minor league baseball that I did not know. I didn't realize some of the things that the players were going through. And yes, even they have decided to start a union. Now, before I get into the article, shout out to Eric, because Eric was the one that told me about this. And I just want to put this out here in reference to baseball. You have the major leagues and you have the minor leagues. This is for people, for those of you that are not into this kind of thing, just want to break this down. Obviously, professional baseball players are going to make more, right? Their salary is going to be higher. I didn't expect the minor league players to have a large salary, but I didn't expect them to have poverty salaries either. So they have decided to start a union. And what does this mean for the future of sports in this country? Let's go ahead and get into this. Now, this is from The Nation. Victory. Minor league baseball players are finally unionized. Now, this broke yesterday, and it says thanks to grassroots organizing, which much of the media is ignoring, minor leaguers will now join the Major League Players Association. You guys might think that this is not a big deal, but this is actually huge. So let's go on. That's an interesting picture there. Let's carry on. Okay, it's a historic day in the annals of both sports and labor history. Minor league baseball players, some of the most precariously positioned workers in this country, have voted to join the Major League Baseball Players Association. For the first time in a 120-year history of minor league baseball, the players are part of a union. Now, I want to pause here for just a second. If you saw the interview that I did with Jesse Ventura, remember he told me even the wrestlers did not have a union. And when they retire, there was no like retirement fund set up per se. Like there's just nothing. So you have to go on to something else. So that's just something to keep in mind. This election is seismic for the lives of the players. Unions make working class jobs better, and minor league baseball players could certainly use a dose of better. Their average salaries can run as low as $10,000 per year for the full season. Let's highlight this. Salaries can run as low as $10,000 per year for the full season. Now, I'll say this again. I do not expect them to make the same type of salary that professional baseball players are making. Don't expect that. But $10,000 a year, those are poverty wages. I don't know anybody that can live off of $10,000 a year without having a second job. They must have another job. I don't know. Don't know. But that's really low. And some people may come in there and say, well, it's just minor league. It's not that important. But does that still mean you should make $10,000 a year? I want you to understand, if you're not familiar with baseball, I want you to understand that the minor league teams, a lot of times, they're still important because these are the farm teams. These are the teams that a lot of times the Major League Baseball teams will recruit players from the farm teams. And I'll give you an example of one that I know very well, and that is one of my favorite baseball players of all time, and that is David Ortiz, also known as whoop whoop Big Papi. A lot of people know Big Papi as a former player for the Boston Red Sox, but he didn't start there. He didn't start with the Minnesota Twins either. Big Papi actually started with the farm team in Minnesota. Then from that farm team, he went on to the Minnesota Twins, then came over to the Red Sox. So those farm teams are important. So you have players that have started at those farm teams that went on to become some of the best baseball players of my generation. So you should not count those out. Now let's go back in. And they are left with nothing if they are thrown on the scrap heap for a teenage prospect. These conditions in minor leagues worsen as Major League Baseball secured record-breaking television contracts and profits galore. This overwhelmingly union vote, which will not be challenged by the Major League Baseball owners nor brought to the NLRB, comes after several other victories in the past year that have increased the confidence of the minor league players to push for representation. Now let's talk about television time, because they mentioned this here. Realistically, people tend to pay attention to the teams and the games that are advertised on television and heavily advertised. This is part of the reason why, not the only reason, but part of the reason why not as many people will watch the, the WNBA, the Women's Professional Basketball League. Not as many people will watch that because it doesn't get as much advertising time, right? So not getting that spot, not getting that commercial push can actually hurt you. Let's go back in. Only this year did Major League Baseball agree to provide housing for these players who had been left on their own trying to figure out how they live and find shelter. Also, the league was finally forced in August to settle an 8-year-old federal lawsuit brought by the minor leaguers that alleged widespread violation of minimum wage laws. How does this even happen? How do you not pay someone minimum wage and get away with it? The settlement of $185 million after lawyer fees will be dispersed among 23,000 players. And imagine if you're one of those players that came from another country. There are a lot of baseball players that are recruited from the Dominican Republic. You come from here from the DR. It's your first time in the US. You don't know all the rules. All you know is you've been offered this gig and they're paying you money, and you may think that what they're paying you is correct because you don't know the laws, you don't know the rules. Imagine how they may have exploited those players that they've recruited from other countries. And now we have a union. To understand how this came to pass, one must first disregard the headline from the Associated Press, which reads, "Minor leaguers form union 17 days after organizing began." This fight has been going on a great deal longer than just 17 days. It was spurred by minor league players agitating and organizing against conditions that would be unacceptable in any other occupation. This has included posting pictures on social media of team meals that look like Oliver Twist meets the Fire Festival. Yikes. Oh boy. I can't believe this is even allowed to go on. Bill Fletcher from The Nation is the outgoing chairperson of the board of the Advocates for Minor Leagues, told me this is the result of work going back years, which changed the climate of the country when it came to its perceptions of minor league baseball players. Ultimately, MLBPA stepped up to the plate, no pun intended, and undertook the organizing. But the prior work laid the foundations and systemically isolated Major League Baseball, demonstrating time again that owner greed, let's highlight this, undermines the sport of baseball. I am so very proud of those who have tirelessly worked on this project, people who joined with others across the USA, raising up the struggle around economic and social justice and ultimately unionization. Boom. So you see, guys, it's happening all around us. Whether it's Starbucks, whether it's Amazon, whether it's the railroad workers, and now even sports, all around us. Thanks for putting that article in the chat, Eric. Thanks so much of that. JB Font says capitalism, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. They should be ashamed of themselves. $10,000 a year. Breaking minimum wage laws. Should have never happened. Rick says next, college athletics. Oh, Rick, I should do a whole separate stream about college athletics, about college athletes. Bill Bradley says the MLB Players Association should absorb these players honestly. That's another issue. So the article goes on. It's a long article. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I do want to go ahead and say, let's give a big congratulations to the minor league baseball players here. Looks like they're finally going to get a decent wage. Welcome to capitalism. Had no idea this was even going on until Eric sent me this story. Going to go to some of the comments here. Yep, X says there's also an EPA protest September 20th to demand EPA forge stronger regulations for clean water and to do something about it in DC. Thank you so much for that. Yep, X. Gamer says Sabby did great on Rising. Thank you so much, Gamer. I appreciate that. Angela, they are dragging this out, hoping that he dies in prison. This is nothing definitive exonerating him, so they don't have to deal with the monsters that they are. Kitty loves films. That's good, Misty. Thank you for what you're doing. Aya, Sabby, thank you so much for having Misty on again and spreading more light of Assange activism. It's so crucial right now. Thank you so much for that, Aya. JB's in the house. $10K per year is a little less than what some of us on Social Security get. You hear that? Thank you for the super chat, Takwish. MLB does the minor league dirty. Oh, it all came out tonight, huh? Indy Left is in the house. Shout out to Indy. Man, I was going to cover this Sunday night. Sharon Zhang wrote a great piece on this in Truth Out. I'll have to check out her piece as well. But let's give a shout out to those guys. Congratulations. Alice Hamer, love this topic, Sabby. Thank you. Thanks. I know not everyone's into sports, but hey, they organized and they got something done. So we still got to talk about it, right? And speaking of getting something done, we're now going into our next story, which is Professor Richard Wolff. This is his latest economic update. Actually, is this the latest one? I forget. Most recent. Yeah. September 12th. I believe this is the latest one. We've been covering Professor Richard Wolff's economic update on here once a week. He's been hitting it out of the park, different issues every time. And this particular discussion here is about homelessness, poverty, wages. The title of this video is called Economic Update, Record Homelessness Defies U.S. Solutions. So I'm going to play a little bit of this here and chime in between because there's some things that Professor Richard Wolff says here that I think are incredibly important. And I think we need to pay very close attention to in reference to the economic situation in this country and poverty. So let's go ahead and get into that.
My next update has to do with California. Under current law in California, the minimum wage will rise to $15.50 in 2023. Mind you, that's a few months away, and that would make the minimum wage in California over double that of the minimum wage, $7.25, on the federal level in the United States. By 2025, under existing California law, it will rise again to $16.50. Now, there was a new law getting ready to be put on the ballot in California, the Living Wage Act, that would have raised all of that to $18 an hour by 2025. And that would have raised the income of 5 million Californians, one quarter of the labor force. It shows that at the state and local levels, legislation favoring labor is possible, exists, has been passed in ways that in other parts of the country don't exist.
Let's chime in here for a second. I want you to hear this last bit one more time, because this is something that I've been pointing to again about those of you that are still passionate about electoral politics. I want you to listen to what he just said about labor.
To $18 an hour by 2025. And that would have raised the income of 5 million Californians, one quarter of the labor force. It shows that at the state and local levels, legislation favoring labor is possible, exists, has been passed in ways that in other parts of the country don't exist.
Let's chime in there for just a second. Now, obviously, I think people should make more than that in California because California is incredibly expensive. But to echo what he was just referring to about the local level, this is why I keep telling people that local politics is more important than national politics. And he just brought up an example in reference to labor and wages. When we look at some of the policies that were on Bernie Sanders' platform or any progressive platform that was running 2018, 2020, even this year, 2022, some of those policies have already been implemented at the local level. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Fight for 15. Seattle implemented that. California implemented that. Massachusetts implemented that. We implemented that years ago. If you look at something like legalizing marijuana, we implemented that years ago. If you look at a policy like paid family leave, Massachusetts implemented that last year. This is why I tell people it is so important that if you're still really passionate about trying to get something done through electoral politics, then your focus should be on the local level, not so much on the national level. We really don't have control over what happens politically in DC. We really don't. We can organize on the outside and put pressure on the politicians that way, but we're not on the inside and we have no say-so there in DC. When it comes to local politics, though, it's different. I can see my mayor. I can see my governor. I don't have access to the politicians in DC. So what you can do, one of the things that can be done is ballot initiatives. We've talked about this before. If you live in a ballot initiative state, you need to take advantage of that. Massachusetts is a BI state. California is a BI state. Take advantage of that. What are the questions that are on the ballot for this November? You don't have to necessarily go vote for a congressperson. Let's say you don't want to vote for any of those people. Fine. But don't ignore the questions or the ballot questions on the local level. That's actually how we legalized marijuana here in Massachusetts. That was a ballot question. So don't ignore that part of it. So ballot initiatives. There's also state legislature. Also, you have a better chance of putting pressure on your local politicians than you do the politicians in DC. And I've seen that happen here as well. So just remember what he said about the labor. If you talk about the fight for 15, if you talk about these labor laws, you have a better chance of pushing back on that at the local level than you do on the national level.
Working people are much better off in California than they are in those other parts. There's simply no way around that. Current calculations as to what a family needs, 2 adults and 1 child, if there's a single wage earner, needs to get $40 an hour for basic, decent living.
$40 an hour for basic, decent living. Most people I know don't make $40 an hour. Just something to think about there. So even when we say, let's increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that still isn't enough. And this is why Richard Wolff has said this before. Technically, the minimum wage, if you adjust for inflation, it should actually be like 30 something, not $15. So we're already behind.
If you have 2 adults and 1 child, but 2 wage earners, they would have to get at least $24 per hour. Even California, with among the most progressive approaches to minimum wages, doesn't come close in the United States to providing, quote, a decent minimum to its families. That tells you a lot, or it should, about where the American economy is, for the vast majority of us. Not for those who own the media, who are the politicians, who run the corporations. Yeah, they tell us what they would like us to believe, but these statistics tell us how it really is. I come next.
And I'm going to chime in here for just a second. And that goes back to that pull yourself up by the bootstraps theory. Maybe that's something that may have worked, I don't know, 7 decades ago. But today, that is obviously much more difficult to do, because if you listen to the breakdown that Professor Richard Wolff just gave you, if you need to make $40 a day, $40 an hour in California, if you need to make that basically just to make a living, to get by, then how do you pull yourself up by the bootstraps if you're not even making that? If you're making $7 an hour, how do you pull yourself up by the bootstraps when you can't even afford to pay for your rent? This is the problem. The wages are suppressed. We definitely need to demand some type of a living wage in this country. I don't want this whole increase the minimum wage anymore. I think we need to have what's called a living wage, because the minimum wage, it's not like that's the minimum that you need to make a living here. That's not enough to even just get by. So what's interesting is, like, it's called the minimum wage, which means this is how much they're supposed to legally pay you, but it's not like that minimum wage is just enough for you to actually live your life, to pay your rent, to buy food. It's not enough for that, which would mean that if you are making minimum wage, you most likely would have to get a second job. You see the problem? Let's go back in.
Next, and I do this with pleasure, to the current mayor of Boston, Massachusetts. Her name is Michelle Wu. A strike at Starbucks started there July 18th of this year. And she went and marched with the strikers. She's the Boston mayor at this.
I just want to chime in here. Yeah, so that's Mayor Michelle Wu, Boston mayor. I will add, I give her kudos for marching with the workers, but I also want to add in here, there's some things about Michelle Wu when it comes to the housing situation here in Boston where she has not been good at. She's allowing these housing complex to basically just fall apart so that the people are pushed out, and allowing developers to come into Black and brown communities to tear the buildings down and rebuild condos in their space. So when it comes to housing, she's horrible. And I confronted her about this. There's a video on my channel. You can go back and find it. I forget the name of the video. Eric might be able to tell you guys. But she was supposed to be the progressive per se in the race. And then she won. And then you see she's operating just like any other, Democrat. So she has allowed developers to come in, push lower income people out of Boston. They now have a further commute. It's been terrible. If you're working class and you're working class and you grew up in Boston and you're still working class today, it is very, very difficult to make it there. Very difficult. And Boston hasn't been able to get a handle on the housing situation for I don't know how long. I've been here over 10 years, and the housing situation was a problem when I moved here. So that hasn't been fixed, regardless of the mayor I've had. Michelle Wu hasn't fixed that. She's actually made it worse. Marty Walsh didn't fix that. He made some promises that he would, didn't happen. And Mayor Menino, who was mayor for over like 20 years, he didn't fix that problem either. This is why I tell you guys a lot of times it doesn't matter which person you put in. They all run on one thing and then they get in and just like, whatever. So I give her kudos for marching with the workers, but she's still screwing people over when it comes to the housing situation in Boston, and she needs to get a handle on that.
Time. And I want to read to you her statement. I am here because I want you to know very clearly that the city of Boston stands with you. We are going to make sure that Boston continues to lead the way in fighting for safe working conditions and the benefits and wages and respect that you all deserve. She was speaking to the Starbucks strikers. Their demands include $25 per hour before tips, as well as job condition improvements. This is another form of labor militancy.
There you go.
Labor is the majority. Labor has the votes. Capital has the money, but labor has the votes, and politicians know it. And if labor becomes more militant, as is happening, you can see it in the struggles to unionize. You can see it in the struggles to strike. You can see it in the struggles to improve minimum wages. We like to document major steps along the way in this process. Well, here's another one. When the connection between a growing militant labor movement is made clear to local politicians, it turns out that you can get levels of support from them that a year or two ago would have been thought unachievable.
And that's true. Again, when it comes to politics on the local level, you have more of an ability to have access to them, to talk to them, and to try to get them to come out and support these events. I wouldn't have been able to just go up and talk to Michelle Wu if she was a congresswoman. You see the difference? That's the thing. And the $25 an hour that the Starbucks workers are asking for here, and I had one of the workers on the show. This is the Starbucks on Comm Ave at BU, at Boston University. And he came on to talk about the things that were happening there and what they're asking for. And some people may hear this and they may think $25 is too much money to ask for. I want to let you know that $25 an hour in Boston, that's nothing. That doesn't go far here. So what they're asking for is really just something that they can be able to get by on so they can pay their rent. But it's not a lot of money here.
I don't want to take away from Michelle Wu's mayoral position and decision to do what she did, but it is not something that can be restricted to Boston. And it is something everyone listening or watching this program ought to be thinking about. What's possible if you mobilize and you organize may surprise you. My last update for today is about a gentleman. His name is Matt Holman, Holman. He was the Food and Drug Administration's top science regulator of the tobacco industry. Remember, the tobacco industry knew for decades that nicotine had all kinds of unwanted health effects, and other parts of smoking cigarettes could and did damage your lungs, even causing mass fatalities, which led to a whole lot of legal wrangling, congressional action, and all the rest. So the Food and Drug Administration was a leading agency, and their man, Matt Holman, was the scientist who was supposed to decide what the science was, and then on the basis of that, what the government should do about the toxic dimensions of the cigarette industry. Well, he announced his retirement after 20 years. And he also announced that he will be joining a corporation whose name you all know, Philip Morris. Okay, what does it mean if a leading official of a government regulatory agency takes a job with the industry they supposedly were supervising, controlling, monitoring, and regulating? In the world of industry, it's called regulatory capture. It's when the regulated capture the regulators, which, from the point of view of the regulated, is exactly what you want.
Regulators! I had to do that. Sorry, guys.
If you can't stop a regulation, well, capture the regulator. And how do you capture him? Well, you offer him a really good job, or at least the prospect of one. And if you didn't offer it, he'd have it in his mind. And you know why? Because he knows the story of Matt Holman, which is reproduced by many others. Matt is not alone. I don't mean to pick on him. He is an exemplar. It's all about the overlap between business and the government, which you ought to worry about because it affects us all.
That's right.
We've come to the end of the first part of today's show. And for those of you who may not,
so that's the end of the first part. Like I said, like there's 2 parts to this, so you can watch the other part. Did I get to? I didn't get to that part.
Precarious situation. I think you very well know in New York City where we both.
Here we go. All right, I want you to hear this part as well.
Based in New York City. His work focuses on changing people's fundamental relationship to land and housing. He works with social movements all around the world, especially related to access to land and housing, to debt issues, and police violence. And he does that in a human rights framework. He lectures widely at many different universities, and currently he's an adjunct professor of urbanism in the Design and Urban Ecology program at Parsons New School University in New York City. So first of all, Rob, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Mr. Wolff.
All right, let me start with a new report. City advocate Jermaine Williams reports in his latest report that there are 80,000 New York City residents listed as homeless.
80,000, you guys. That's just in New York City.
Can you just give us, and I know this is difficult, but in your own words, in a short summary way, what does this mean? How do we get our heads around 80,000 people in the city of New York that have no home? What does it mean for them? And what does it mean for the larger community?
So thank you. First, let me say, I think that number is a low estimate. I might make the argument, I think I could make a valid argument for the number being close to 150,000. Because when you talk about homelessness, you're talking about people in shelters, you're talking about families doubled up, you're talking about people living on the streets, and I'm not so sure we do the best or the most accurate count when we can. There's a federal count that takes place every year, counting people on the streets, and I'm not so sure how accurate that is. But I think
I just want to chime in here for a second, and I just want to explain something. Homeless doesn't mean that you're sleeping outside on the street. That's the most visible sign of homelessness that you'll be able to see. But homeless means you're unhoused as well. So if you're sleeping on your friend's couch, or if you're sleeping in your car, you don't have a place of your own, you are still homeless. And oftentimes those people are not counted when the government does these types of counts. They're mainly going out to look for people on the street that don't have a a dwelling, they're sleeping on park benches, or they're sleeping in the subway, that kind of thing. Visible homelessness, where they usually, I would say mess up, actually, where they usually kind of mess up with this count, is that they're not counting people who are not necessarily visibly homeless. People who, just like I told you, might be sleeping in their car or might be crashing on a friend's couch. Those people oftentimes are left out of that data. So just keep that in mind.
The fundamental issue is rents rising faster than wages. And that's always going to put people in a strange and precarious situation. I think you very well know in New York City, where we both are, rents are upwards of $5,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. And I think the outer boroughs are no bargain either. You go to places like Brooklyn, it's around $3,500. The Bronx lowered, believe it or not, to about $2,200. But these are high numbers, and this is difficult for people to deal with.
Why is now the time when we're hearing that these are record numbers? The 80,000 in that report is listed as a record high in the history of the city of New York. I mean, what's going on that makes it bad now? And especially given that, at least, I mean, you know better than I do, of course, decades and decades of talking about this, of commissions about this, of reports about this, out of politicians promising to deal with it. Why? I mean, not only did they not solve the problem, but we're at these records. What's going on?
They exacerbated the problem. So let's start with the pandemic and sort of work backwards. The pandemic exacerbated an ongoing issue. This issue is not new, as you clearly laid out. It's been in existence for a number of years here and around the country. But the solutions that people in power have come up with don't work. They failed, right? Because there's a fundamental issue of when somebody is homeless, it's because they don't have a home. So our answer has been, in places like New York, is to put people in shelters. A shelter is not a home. It doesn't surround you with the sense of community, with the sense of medical that you may need to work on a problem like this, or to end this particular problem. Yeah,
and also I want to add in here as well, it's not easy to necessarily get into a homeless shelter. There's curfews. They can only have a certain amount of number of people in. Some homeless shelters won't allow women. Some homeless shelters won't allow children to come in with you. So if you're homeless and you have a child, there are certain shelters that will not let you come in and stay. The other thing you have to worry about if you're at a homeless shelter as well, you got to worry if someone's going to steal your stuff while you're sleeping. You have to worry about someone attacking you while you're sleeping. These are a lot of the things that happen that are not talked about when people say, oh, just go stay in a homeless shelter. I mentioned curfew. If you're homeless and you have a job, and yes, some homeless people have jobs, and your job is in the evening, well, if there's a curfew and your job is a waitress and you have to close at night, are you going to make that curfew to get back in time to get inside the homeless shelter? Not necessarily. So these are things that people need to know. Homeless shelters also have a lot of rules. So for example, if you are intoxicated, or if you may be a victim of substance abuse, you may not be allowed to come into the homeless shelter. So that is not a fix. It should not be a long-term solution. That is more looked at like a temporary thing. The long-term solution and plan should be to get them homes, but also you have to do something about the rent, because rent control, I think, should have stayed a thing. And rent control has gone away. At least in Boston, it's gone. Like, we haven't had rent control here, I think, since the 90s. So there's no rent control. There's no rent stability. The landlords can increase the rent as much as they want to. And this is why more people are being evicted. So if you had people in these cities like Boston and New York City that were shut down during the pandemic, and they didn't have their jobs, and they weren't making any kind of money, and they didn't have money to pay the rent, by the time people started issuing out the stimulus checks for some of those people, it was already too late. So where did they go? They were evicted. Let's go back in.
Problem. And I think we have to get more creative of using vacant spaces, right? We'd rather rent for profit rather than take the money that we spend on homelessness, which is a problem in New York. We spend close to $5 billion a year in New York City to try to handle this issue, but we're not handling it. We're just sweeping it to the side. And I think part of the problem is a law that came into effect in 1989 in New York called the Right to Shelter Law, which we're hearing a lot about now because migrants out of Texas are being sent to New York because of this law. What that law essentially says is if somebody comes to the city on a given night and says, I want a shelter bed, the city is obligated to give them a shelter bed. And sometimes that sits for solving the problem. That doesn't solve the problem. That sweeps it to the side. People are homeless because they don't have a home. So we have to come up with better solutions.
That's
You
right.
know, I've heard the following statistic, which is in Jermaine Williams's report again, that the shelter, as you point out, was always designed to be a temporary way station to what is a permanent or would be a permanent solution. And yet, families in the latest year for which they have documentation, which I believe is 2020, the average number of days in a shelter by a homeless family in New York City was listed as 500 days. In other words, we were sticking people into the temporary shelter and they were there more than a year and a half. Isn't that a sign of failure of a system?
Yeah, absolutely, that's a sign of failure. And that's what brought me to this work. I think you probably know my own personal story. I'm formerly homeless. I spent 10 months in a New York City shelter, and I was told, you were only in there for 10 months? Wow. And I thought that was problematic. I thought a shelter should be something that was temporary, 30 days for a month, and then you to find a permanent solution. But shelters have become homes in New York City and other places around the country for people. They've become permanent solutions, right? Because our elected and appointed officials can't seem to come up with problem solving. And part of that reason is because they've never experienced the problem. They're trying to figure out something they know nothing about. Bring in people who have this lived experience, who understand what they went through, who knows what led them into the situation to help resolve the issue. I do think we're moving in that direction a little bit in New York City. We have somebody named Jessica Katz, who is our chief housing officer. And one of the first things she did, which other mayoral administrations had never done, was put out a report, a homelessness and housing blueprint. In the past, they've always been separated. It made no sense. Why are you separating these two issues? You're homeless because you don't have a home.
That's right.
So whatever you're doing to solve housing solutions should include homeless people. But the city has always taken a road that they would separate the two. And
That's right. That's right. I have to move on to the next story, but I do want to just say here, I think we've seen this happen multiple times before where the people who are the most affected are not included in the decision-making process. So if you're trying to figure out how to solve or fix the housing situation, why are you not including people who are homeless, who are at those shelters? Why are you not including them as a part of that process in the decision-making? I think it's because some people are afraid of them. I think some people are afraid of homeless people. Why? I don't know. I'm going to go to the comments on Rockfin, Eric, and I'll get the ones on YouTube. We'll go to the next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave, joining the stream. I have a vision of people being able to organize their own games and organize their own communities. Do it your damn self. Work hard and then come to the picnic with some wood laid up. And thank you for this tip on Rockfin, Roger. Millionaire Joe Sandberg, who is funding this initiative, I don't know if this is a vanity project for him to think, hey, look at me. I am the rich guy financing a BI to raise minimum wage to $18 by 2026. When I called him out on why is he pushing for crumbs when California minimum wage should be $44 to $62 an hour, depending on where you are in California, of the Out of Reach Project report. No response. I'm tired of these rich libs clout chasing. Well said, Roger. Well said. I'll go to some of the comments here on YouTube. JB says Florida is implementing a $15 minimum wage right now. It was voted on via ballot initiative. That's right. That's right. See, that was done on the local level. General Ablon, love you, Sabs. Greetings from the Netherlands. Hello. Alice says local and state is critical for any political activity, citizens initiatives. Here in Southeast Corner, Arizona ballot initiatives on water regulations. There you go. At Kid, Sabby, all reasonable working folks understand we must have a true living wage for society to effectively work. Yet those in power don't want that. Why? That's a good question, a kid. Simone, landlords raise the rent right about the feds approve. Oh, sorry. Landlords raise the rents, I think, right about the time the feds approved the emergency rental assistance because it was guaranteed money. But now people have to figure out how to pay the increase. There you go. And thank you for the super chat. Cat83, left nose regulatory capture. Why blind on jab? I have to be careful what I say here. Why blind on pandemic jab? Interesting. JB says, I'll be talking about homelessness on RBN this Sunday. Awesome, guys. Make sure you check that out. JB's show is on Sunday on RBN. Yeah. So this morning, something happened here in Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard. It seems that Ron DeSantis decided to send migrants from Florida to Martha's Vineyard, to Massachusetts, and say, hey, Governor Baker, you deal with them. Let's get into this story. I have so much to say. So much to say here. Oh, wait a minute. I think I went to the wrong thing. I think I was going to go to the article first. Do I not have an article? Oh, I do have an article. Let me go to the article first, and then I'll get to that video. Okay. DeSantis claims credit for sending 2 planes carrying migrants to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. I kid you not. I couldn't make this up if I wanted to, you guys. 2 planes carrying migrants were sent to Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis to Martha's Vineyard on, two planes carrying migrants were sent by Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis to Martha's Vineyard on Wednesday night. His office said infuriating Democratic politicians and prompting a frenzied response that included humanitarian aid by locals and assistance by Massachusetts officials. And this is where I want to jump in here for just a second. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but a lot of times people see Massachusetts as like this progressive state. Parts of Massachusetts can be somewhat progressive. But our Governor Charlie Baker, is actually Republican. So just wanted to put that out there. In the latest in a series of moves by Republican governors to transport migrants to northern liberal enclaves to protest what they say are inadequate federal efforts on southern border security. Located off the coast of Massachusetts and long known as a posh summer destination for wealthy vacationers, Martha's Vineyard provided an unusual and unexpected place for the migrants to be sent. I disagree with that. I think if you are trying to play politics, I think this is all for show, what Ron DeSantis is doing. I think if you're trying to send a message, you would send them to a Martha's Vineyard, because there's a lot of wealthy people that live in Martha's Vineyard and they don't really want to deal with lower class people. You'd be surprised. And this is what I referred to before, is about liberals being okay with an issue and say that they support a cause, they support an issue, but they want it at arm's length. They don't want it in their backyard. They're NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. So I don't think that was an unusual location. I think he knew exactly what he was doing by sending them there. So here we go. Let's go on. We are not a sanctuary state, and it's better to be able to go to a sanctuary jurisdiction. And yes, we will help facilitate that transport for you to be able to go to greener pastures. Now, that's coming from Ron DeSantis. Every community in America should be sharing in the burdens. It shouldn't all fall on the handful of red states. Okay. Now we're going to go to this video because I told you guys, this is all for show. This is political chess. This is him making moves. And basically, this is his way of saying, let's see how these governors in these states that say they're sanctuary states, let's see how they handle it. U.S. politics is a joke. It really is. So let's listen to this clip here on CNN.
An immigration battle escalating near the vice president's doorstep. Buses of migrants sent from Texas dropped off just feet from her residence in Washington overnight. And this happening a day after officials on Martha's Vineyard were sent scrambling after dozens of migrants unexpectedly arrived there.
The office of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says it was he who sent 2 planes to the Massachusetts island with more than 50 migrants on board. You see a picture there. See then Steve Contorno live in Washington. Steve, you have this happen up Martha's Vineyard. I saw a group of migrants dropped off in front of the vice president's residence here in D.C. this morning as well. What's happening?
Well, the governor of Florida has been promising for months, really, that he is going to do something about the migrants that he sees at the border. He's worried about them coming to the state of Florida. You know, there are so many migrant communities and communities from Latin America and South America already here. And he has been threatening for months, saying that if the Biden administration doesn't act on immigration, then he is going to send he's going to do what all these other Republican governors have done, like Governor Abbott in Texas, and start sending these people into Democratic strongholds and sanctuary cities. And that's what he says he is doing here. Now, we don't know a lot of the details about how these flights were arranged. The governor's office has only said that they helped pay for these flights through a program that set aside $12 million earlier this year just for this purpose.
Pause. That means he used taxpayer money. So he used taxpayer money to send them to different states. And it's kind of troubling that this commentator here just basically said, we don't know how they got on the planes. We don't know how this. Isn't that kind of scary and kind of concerning that here you had a politician who was just able to put people on planes and send them to different places and nobody seems to know how it happened? That's strange. I got to tell you something about Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard, it's an island, okay? It's part of Massachusetts, but it's an island. There's not a lot of people on Martha's Vineyard, especially when it's off season. How are you going to get off of Martha? How are you going to leave? How are you going to get off of Martha's Vineyard? They are on an island. It's not easy to get to, and it's not easy to leave. I'm just being honest here. I'm being honest with you. It is not easy to get to Martha's Vineyard. You got to drive your car to this port. You got to get on the ferry, get on the boat, go over there. It costs money to get your car on the boat and then to bring it to the island. And then people don't have private jets all the time to get over there. It's not easy to get there. Let me just make that clear.
But there's been already swift condemnation in Florida for these actions. Within hours of this coming to light, the Florida Democratic Party chairman, Manny Diaz, released a statement in which he said, quote, "There is nothing that DeSantis won't do and nobody that he won't hurt in order to score political points. He took dozens of families and children, reportedly from Venezuela and Colombia, away from everyone that they knew, flew them across the country, and left them by the side of the road without shelter or direction, all in order to score political points." And really leaving them with no one that they knew is exactly what happened. According to representatives on the ground, they had no idea that these people were going to show up. They basically have been setting up emergency shelters similar to what they would do if there was a hurricane to help these people and give them some temporary housing. We did hear from a volunteer last night who spoke a little bit about what they saw, and they had this to say.
I don't know how they found their way from the airport to Martha's Vineyard Community Services. It's a long walk. They're not near each other.
Told you.
They probably walked, I'm guessing they walked for 5 miles. We fed them and we've housed them for tonight. And in the morning, we'll figure out tomorrow.
Now, Jim, as you mentioned, we are watching closely what's happening outside of the Naval Observatory right now to see how this is unfolding today as well. And we'll probably have more updates for you later on that.
Wow, wow,
Steve Cortono,
wow,
thank you
wow.
very much.
All right, joining us now for his reaction and what comes next, Democratic Congressman Bill Keating of the state of Massachusetts. Congressman, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Good morning, Jim.
So first, this is part of a pattern here, right? We've seen them taken to a number of blue states, blue cities. First, your reaction to these migrants being dropped off on Martha's Vineyard.
Well, I had a personal call yesterday afternoon from a Martha's Vineyard official. They were taken totally off guard. A private chartered plane, evidently there were 2, not cheap, was on the island, and probably 50, sending first plane 25, next plane.
A private chartered plane. A private chartered plane.
Maybe 25 people were there, and they didn't know what to do. Had no idea. And they reported to me that these people got off the plane, men, women, and children from Venezuela, as they told me, and they had a map or instructions in their hand where they would get housing and jobs. And it was a vacant parking lot, the destination. And we contacted our governor. In fact, Jim, this is interesting. This is a tale of 2 governors, 2 Republican governors. One who was using taxpayer money for chartered jets and reportedly his own video photographer to capture this for his own political benefit, taking advantage of women and children, men who didn't know where they were going. And another governor in Massachusetts that we contacted in his office who put his nose to the grindstone and had his agency spring into action, and along with local officials, deal with the manufacturing crisis.
By the way, Governor Charlie Baker here is not running for re-election. So just keep that in mind. He can basically do the bare minimum here in reference to the situation and kind of be in the clear because he's not trying to run again.
You should note the governor of Massachusetts, of course, currently a Republican. I want to ask about the law, but before I get there, just the immediate issue here. Can local resources support these migrants there, and how and for how long?
That's part of the cynical nature of this. Martha's Vineyard is a very small populated island. People commute from the land just to work there because there's no housing. So there's absolutely no resources to deal with this. But fortunately, religious community members and local officials and now state officials are springing into action to deal with it. So there was no ability to do it here. This wouldn't have been a destination simply to move them from one state to another. This was clearly just to attract political attention with an island that is known in the summertime for its wealthy visitors. But I've got to tell you this, that it backfired on him with the response of local officials.
Let me ask you this, though, because the way the current law stands, when you have folks come to the border, they apply for asylum, as they're waiting for their cases to be heard, adjudicated, they can't travel inside the U.S. and often do on their own. Does that law need to be changed?
Well, I think the whole system, obviously, Jim's broken, and we could deal with issues if we could ever get together, particularly on the Senate side of things. We're not even dealing with people who were taken here as children, the DACA children, the dreamers, who came here and gainfully employed or in the military or in school by definition. So really, instead of these stunts, I hope we can get some bipartisan and bicameral help to just deal with the problem and move the thing forward. Because, using this issue as a political wedge evidently has worked for a while in terms of politics. It's just not the way to treat human beings. And it's really not being responsible if you put your hand in the air and take an oath to help people.
An immigration back.
Let's jump in here for a second, because there's something I do want to say. I want to remind everybody that this is absolutely a part of Kamala Harris's job. She was assigned the task of handling the border situation. And in her recent interview, which I played for you guys, she said the border was secure. Does the border look secure to you? And I told you then she was lying. It doesn't matter if we've had a Democrat or Republican candidate. When it comes to immigration in this country, this situation has not been handled. It's not fixed. There's still kids in cages at the border. You saw what just happened with what Ron DeSantis just did. So people are still, they're getting to Florida. This situation has not been fixed. And I think it's always important to ask, why are they coming here to begin with? A lot of times people, they want to talk about illegal immigration, but they don't want to talk about the reason why they're coming here. Why would you flee your own country, risk your life to get here? You have to be in a desperate situation, right? Why do they have so much despair in the countries that they're coming from? Why do people have so much violence and despair in Venezuela? Because of the United States government. The countries where they are coming from, they are fleeing those countries because the countries have become so violent to the point where it's not safe necessarily just for them, but their own children. But who gave them the weapons? They didn't just appear. So you had U.S. government, they have been intervening these countries. They have been selling weapons to these countries. The people who were able to get the weapons have turned on the people who could not. And it has become a violent state. The U.S. government has to take some type of responsibility for that. You cannot just sit here and point fingers and say, oh my God, all of them are coming. Can't do that. You also can't sit here and say, oh, the border is secure. It's not. Can't do that, Kamala. When is the U.S. government going to stand up and take accountability for the destruction that they have caused in those countries? When? That's why they're coming here. The U.S. government destroys multiple countries abroad, and then they still expect the people to live in those countries and say, just live there, just deal with it. But don't try to come here. It's a problem. Let me get those questions on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Oh, shoot. Is Sabby keeping her promise about what our march out here we are having on Long Island? I am on bated breath. I got to find this guy, outlaw private equity from owning hospitals, nursing homes, clinics, medical facilities, etc., and transfer ownership and operation to the state or municipality with the intent of someday when they are ready, eventually transferring ownership to the workers, nurses, technicians, custodians, cafeteria workers, and the rest of the staff, making them worker cooperatives. Then establish a government co-op partnership of hospitals and clinic facilities between the two, or have the government take ownership and operation of the hospitals and clinical facilities if the workers do not wish to be owners. Thank you for the tip, Jim. $5 for your beautiful truth telling. Thank you so much. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Even though that last message was a good idea, that was not what I meant to send, seeing they weren't talking about healthcare, but homelessness. The following is what I meant to send: outlaw private equity from owning houses, residential apartments, and small buildings, transfer ownership to the state, maybe until will-be owners and landlords can pay it off. Rent speculation, gone. And thank you for this tip as well. Also, I'm resending this because you and Eric didn't read yesterday regarding Denver homelessness and what DeSantis is doing, sending migrants to sanctuary cities, pretty much owning Dems. Politically, it is Sabby, kind of like that Nebraska farmer pouring that, oh, so delicious, thirst quenching H2O in that glass. So here it is. And thank you for this as well. They're learning from Mayor de Blasio what he did in the middle of the night, putting the homeless on a bus and sending them to Jersey City right over the Hudson, gave them enough money to get an apartment lasting 3 months. Once Jersey City was homeless, population exploded. Mayor started seeing all these homeless people all over the place, and he was like, what the hell? Once he found out, he got de Blasio on the line and had colorful words with him. Thank you so much for that, Roger Meadows. Now, it's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And it's embarrassing. 2022, and they still haven't fixed immigration in this country. Still, till this day. Now, quick special shout out event tomorrow for those of you that live in New York or that New York area. There is a Housing for All march and rally. Housing for All Long Island Rally and March. A new coalition, Housing for All Long Island, is hosting a rally and a march September 17th. That's tomorrow. Fill out the form below to RSVP. There's a rally at 9:30 a.m. in Suffolk. The Nassau March starts at 10:45 a.m. Rockville Center. And it looks like they're making stops here along the way. Eric, if you put the link to this in the chat, please. Thank you so much. All times are approximate. And here's a list of the sponsors here. And then you'll see there's the Google form right here as well. So all of you guys that are in the New York area, check this out if you can. Don't be shy. Get out there. Meet some people. March with some people. Do the darn thing. All right. So immigration, we're going to talk about this tonight on Call In. We got to have this discussion. DeSantis transfers migrants. I want to hear all of your opinions about this, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. And what do you think should be done to fix the immigration problem in this country? I am going to go take my quick break and Eric will come in for just a second. Eric, I think the YouTube comments have not been read. So we'll want to read those. But yeah, really interested to hear your thoughts about this. Do you agree with what Ron DeSantis did? Do you disagree? Like, what do you think should happen about immigration in this country? Let me know.
Here we go. Hello. All right, now it's Sabby break time, and then when Sabby comes back, it's gonna be call-in time. Now let's make sure everybody has that call-in link. We're here hanging out on a nice Friday night, talking about fixing the world as usual. All right, I posted the call-in link, and as usual, once we get into the call-in part, you can either hit the link and catch it on your browser, or you can put the call-in app on your phone and you can listen to it on there, and you can also join the conversation like Russell Brand likes to say. We want to, that's just what we think. We want to hear what you think. All right, let's see what we got queued up for some of these comments. We had one come in from JB Font saying that $12 million could have went to poor people like me who live in his state. Instead, he uses it to ship poor immigrants away because of his hatred for poor migrants of color. True there. From Rick Solis. Remember, the reason why we have an immigration problem is both parties have exploited resources and destabilized governments in the global south, which is why my people are used as a political football. Definitely true that, Rick. Is from Ad Kid. Sabby, please consider all Central and Southern American immigrants are actually American, because all of them are part of the American continent, and yet we treat them worse than Europeans. Definitely a good point there. Ed Kid is one of the Erics that I assume we'll be hearing from tonight on Call-In. We have several Erics that come in here. Here's Roger reminding us to make sure we don't miss his super chats, and those did get read out, Roger, and you even got to have them read out by Sabby. You didn't have to settle for me reading your Rockfin chats. So there you go. All right, she's black posted, imperialism is the problem. Very succinct and well stated, definitely. And this one also from AdKid I thought was interesting, noting Sabby, great question. Why are they coming here? U.S. empire policies and agenda destroys other countries' abilities to drive their own direction. Definitely true that from AdKid. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been, that I always come to is that these problems are big and systemic, and the fixes are going to have to be systemic, and they generally are going to have to get into the money, into who's really running things, and so when it gets into this thing of Desantis is shipping the migrants up to Massachusetts, which is, of course, disgusting and, just barbaric, treating people like, as one of the person in the comments said, like cargo, and just, terrible, but true enough. And then on the other side, you've got the Democrats acting holier than thou, and, so DeSantis is so terrible doing this thing. And, well, who's the person putting them in cages now is, of course, Mr. Biden, the big, Democrat that we're all supposed to vote for because the Republicans are so evil. And, Democrats aren't fixing anything. And why is that? And of course, the answer is it's because they work for the same interests. They work for the same money class. And so this kind of stuff, I always like to think in terms of like the Overton window stuff where it's you're only allowed to fight over the certain things. And so while we're arguing over immigration and things like that, we're not talking about the systemic problems where all this stuff is about the money, and it's about both parties serve the big money interests. You can run the same thing talking about homelessness. What do we need to do to fix homelessness? Well, I mean, it seems like there's a pretty simple answer of build houses. And build some more houses, and then build some more houses. Now, why isn't that happening? Well, there's this thing called the housing market, and the way they view it, in real estate viewers and private equity, which are buying up all the properties and houses, the way they view it is that any cheap house that gets built depresses the market that they're getting rich off of. And so they make damn sure that their representatives, who are their representatives, not ours, put the kibosh on a whole bunch of new houses getting built, and so it doesn't happen. So the fix isn't going to be to elect some better Democrats or some different Republicans or whatnot. The fix is going to have to be electing people who are not all about the money and serving the moneyed interests. Now, the other thing I wanted to make sure to highlight here while I have the mic, while we're waiting for Sabby to come back from her break and jump into Call-In, is to definitely highlight again, show this, the action for Assange in Washington, D.C. This is Saturday, October 8th, out near the Department of Justice, outside of it. And it's I'm actually planning on going to this myself, and so we'll see. It's gonna be pretty wild and pretty interesting. It's an incredible lineup of people, and get people like Chris Hedges even getting in on that. So that's gonna be pretty wild, and it's gonna be also really interesting to have people meeting up that are all in this space and all into these things. It should be a pretty amazing time, and of course, it's always all around the central point of this whole prosecution of Assange, and just how ridiculous and barbaric it is. Let's see what else we got to talk. Oh yeah, we were also talking about baseball, and I think somebody mentioned the Susan Sarandon film, which is Bull Durham, which was Susan Sarandon, Kevin Costner, and that's about the minor leagues. And that film is always what I think. What I think of when I think of the minor leagues, and I don't know how accurate it really was, but you certainly got the idea of these guys struggling and just trying to get up to the league, get up to the big leagues, and those guys playing at that minor league level. I mean, they were literally they live and breathe the baseball and the game, and they will literally do anything to get to the big leagues and get to be one of those stars. And so they're certainly ripe for exploitation. And the other thing I thought of was that there's going to be, even at the minor league, there's going to be a top 100 or so group of players who are the big prospects and the minor league stars, and they're going to get paid well, and then the other 5,000 or so are going to get peanuts, and that's really what's happening there, and that's why, of course, you need a union. And let's straighten this up. Put this here. We just had a little super sticker from Talkish. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Talkish.
All right. So I don't know. Are we going to meet up in D.C. in October or not? Well, I'm going to stop putting pressure on you, Sabby.
No, I'll know for sure next week. So I told Misty I should let her know for sure next week.
Cool.
So,
I think we're ready to jump over then.
I definitely hope to be there. Definitely. So
happy Friday. I'll see you in call-in.
All right, guys. All right. So we're heading on over to call-in again. And tonight's call-in discussion is episode 42, DeSantis transfers migrants. Ron DeSantis has transferred migrants to from Florida to Massachusetts, sending a strong message to Governor Charlie Baker. What should be done about immigration reform? And I want to hear from you guys. That call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat. So you know how we do this. I'm going to head out. I'm going to open up that room and we're going to go ahead and get started. So you know how we do this, guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.